All right, everyone, welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. Another edition. It still remains the home of your 2020 World Series champion, Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As usual, that's Daniel Starkand. Another full week of spring training under our belts. We've got a good show for you guys tonight. We've got questions about, is Dave Roberts right when he says the Dodgers and Padres is not a rivalry? Is it possible that David Price pitches as a reliever and not a starter for the Dodgers? And last but not least, who do we, as of today, have filling out the back of our opening day rosters? All questions we're going to get to, in addition to stock up, stock down, big deal, no deal quotes from the week. But before we get to any of that, Daniel, we've got two things that we need to discuss. The first one, some people are already going to have noticed. I make fun of your hair last week in comparison to Tony Gonsolin, and here you are with a haircut. Please explain yourself.
Yes, no, you hurt my feelings. No, I'm just kidding. No. Honestly, it had just gotten to the point where it was just like too much. Like for a while there, I was able to like contain it a little bit. And it just got to the point where it was like down to here, like, and I couldn't even do anything with it. And also, it was my birthday this past weekend, so I was like going out to dinner with family and stuff. So I decided to get a little trim. Still kept some length. But yeah, feels good honestly to it was my first haircut in like a full year. So yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, when we first started the show, your hair was slowly got longer and longer and longer. So
Yeah.
I had to do a double take if you even got a haircut. It's still long. So, good
Yeah.
stuff there. And the second thing, it's this is a small beef that I have to settle with you here. I'd settle it with Matt Moreno, but he's not with us on the show. And that is my Oregon Ducks edge out the Pac-12 title in college basketball. I get no congratulatory text. I don't even get a response to my message on Twitter. Your Bruins, Matt's Trojans, nothing. Come on.
I'm still salty to be honest. Yeah, the way UCLA lost the last two games, they basically controlled their own destiny. They were up 9 against Oregon with about 7 or 8 minutes left, and then totally collapsed. And then they used to lose to USC on a buzzer beater. So yeah, it's been a rough week for my UCLA basketball fandom. But hey, we'll both be in the tournament. We got first the Pac-12 tournament coming up, then the NCAA tournament. So who knows? Maybe we'll be able to get some revenge there. But
Seriously.
yeah, congrats, Pac-12 regular season champs, Oregon Ducks.
I
Good
know.
for you.
Crazy, crazy. Didn't see it coming. We had to stop multiple times. But enough. Nobody came here to talk about the Oregon Ducks. We're here to talk about the Dodgers. And so let's do that. Let's dive in. We're going to start with this segment we brought up last week. We appreciate the folks joining us: Kevin, Gabby, Eddie. We got Mookie Betts apparently in the chat, Guillermo, sports voiceovers. We got lots of folks. We appreciate you all joining us. Thanks for sticking with us. We got mailbag time at the end. But let us know. We're going to start with a new segment we started last week, which is stock up and stock down. As the season goes along week to week, who are the guys that the arrow is trending up? Who are the guys that the arrow is trending down? Obviously, we want to be honest. We want to be realistic. We want to have some stock down candidates when those exist. I know you've got at least one. I had one on my list that got edged slightly off. I'll explain that when I get there. But Daniel, I'll let you start. The first guy that you want to mention, stock up or stock down. And again, if for those joining us in the chat, please let us know who is trending up and who is trending down in your mind. So Daniel, the first person that comes to mind, trending up, trending down. Who do you got?
Yeah, my first guy is someone who pitched today, and he was pitching for the first time in a while, and that's David Price. He went out there. He only pitched 1 inning in relief, which I thought was kind of interesting. We'll get to more of that later, I'm sure. But he 1, 2, 3 inning, and it was against legit big
Yeah.
leaguers. Is the top of the White Sox lineup, and they said his velocity touched 94, which was harder than he's thrown in a while. So he looked good. I mean, we've talked previously on the show. We weren't really sure what to expect from him. Is he going to be rusty? Is he going to be even more fresh coming off a year off? But he looked like prime David Price out there. Obviously, I know it's early. It's his first outing of the spring, but hey, if that's outing number one, I feel like it's only going to continue to get better from there. So I really liked what I saw out of David Price. And I think he's going to have a big year now.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll definitely get to some David Price stuff coming because there was some interesting comments coming out today. But
Yeah.
I'm with you. I mean, we're going to talk about the 25-man roster here in a little bit. There was a moment when I actually wasn't sure if he was even going to be ready. We hadn't even seen him pitch. We hadn't heard. He sits out the whole offseason, or excuse me, all of last season, and then for him to come out today, and like you said, I mean, so many of the spring training statistics, I feel like, need to be taken with a grain of salt because it's like, hey, this guy had 3 great innings. Well, against 2. David Price came in and he gets Anderson, Robert, and Abreu. I mean, he gets the 3 best hitters, 3 of like all-star level hitters, and just mows them down. No issues whatsoever. There was a little bit of contact, but he did get a strikeout on a pretty nasty, I think, slider or something that
Yeah.
was down in the dirt. So I'm with you. I mean, hard not to like what we saw out of David Price. He was great in spring training a year ago.
Yeah,
We
it
haven't
was.
seen him be bad in a Dodger uniform. Very small
Yeah.
sample size, but definitely a good one there. So David Price, stock up for you. I'll go. Yeah, I'll go with the pitcher as well. This is a guy that you and I have talked a lot about, weirdly enough, given the circumstances. But Dennis Santana is going to be my stock up guy. And I know this is a guy, again, that you like as well. 3 appearances so far this spring, 3 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs, 3 strikeouts. And I think the thing people forget about when it comes to Santana, he's 24 years old. Okay, Mitchell
Yeah.
White is older than Dennis Santana. He is the same age as Andre Jackson. Victor Gonzalez is a year older. Tony Gonsolin is 2 years older. And so we compare him just because he came up to the majors way back in 2018. It's like we hold him to this standard as if he's 28, 29. He is 24, about to turn 25. Yes, the major league stuff has been rough. A 12.27 ERA in 1 game in 2018. 2019, 3 games at 7.2. 2020, 12 games at 5.29. But he has looked really good. Dave Roberts, quote, I think he's really healthy. He's gotten a lot more physical, put a lot of good work in this winter with the delivery. I think he's able to hold positions throughout the delivery with core and lower half strength. It's just allowing him to execute pitches consistently. He has as good of command as we've seen out of him. Command has been his issue. And so I've loved what I've seen out of Dennis Santana. And I think he's a fascinating one when we get to our conversation later tonight about does he have a chance at the opening day roster?
Yeah. Santana's a guy I considered for my stock up as well. So I'm glad you're naming him here. He's looked great so far. With him, it's just a matter of 2 things, I feel like, and you just mentioned both of them. It's his health because he's dealt with a fair amount of injuries the last few years, and B, it's his command. We know he's got great stuff. We know he's got the fastball that's 96, 97. He's got a good changeup and a nice little slider, but it's just a matter of can he throw it where he wants to,
Yeah.
and if he can, I think he still has a chance to be a really successful big league pitcher. And he's looked great in the spring so far. Like you just mentioned, the Dave Roberts quote. He's competing for a roster spot. It's looking like probably a bullpen spot.
Yeah.
He's kind of lower on the totem pole as far as starters. I still think maybe long term they view him as a starter. But right now they're not short on starting pitching. They don't need him in that role, and he's got the stuff to play up in the bullpen. So I expect him to be competing for a spot in the bullpen and maybe even some leverage innings if he continues to throw the way he has. So yeah, I've liked what I've seen out of Dennis Santana. Another thing is he looks like he's in great shape.
Yeah.
He looks like he put on some muscle in the offseason, and like you said, he's only 24. So it's not like a lot of people have written this guy off like, oh, he's a bust. He's not going to amount to anything, but he's still only 24. Like, let's just, see where things go this season. This could be a big year for him.
Totally. I mean, like Andre Jackson is another guy. Like nobody has high expectations for Andre Jackson this year. Now, Andre Jackson's been good, but like nobody is clamoring for like these crazy. Andre Jackson is a month difference in age than Dennis Santana. And so I think it's like Urias, where you just forget how young Julio Urias is because he came up as a 19-year-old. You can't remember the first time you saw him. You just have to put it in perspective. How old is he? Where is he at in his development? And so definitely been encouraged. THP mentions his fastball was up to 97 miles an hour this spring, according to some spots. So
That'll play.
That'll
as the
play.
kids say.
That'll play. So who do you got for number 2?
For number 2, my second stock up, my third's a stock down, so this is my last stock up. I got probably the guy we've talked about the most on this show, I feel like, leading up to the spring, and that's Gavin Lux. He's looked really good so far. He's 5 for 11 at the plate. He's had some solid contact, and also he's looked good defensively, both at second and at short. It's obviously very small sample size, still a lot of ways to go, but this is something that we arguably more than anything else, we're keeping an eye on this spring. Gavin Lux, I feel like, had the most to gain and the most to lose from these Cactus League games. And so far he's making the most of it, and he's looking like he's basically a shoo-in now to not only make the opening day roster, but also to be starting at second base on opening day. So yeah, I've liked what I've seen out of Lux. And one thing I feel like that's looked different with him is he's kind of like I don't even know the word for it, but he used to have a lot going on with his swing, and now he's kind of the word's escaping me, but
Settled
he's
down,
looking
kind of
less. Yeah, he's settled down at the plate. There's less movement going on there, and I think that's helped him a lot.
quiet, maybe quiet, a quiet.
Yes, he's quieted down at the
There you
plate.
go.
There you go.
There was the baseball lingo term we were
There you
looking. I mean,
go.
yeah, the thing is we overreacted to Lux struggling out of the gates last year. So how can we not then sort of equally overreact to him looking great
Yeah.
out of the gates? There was one of our videos that some guy got in like a 30 comment, message board back and forth on YouTube, which I love the dialogue. I love the back and forth, but the idea that some people have already given up on this guy is crazy to me. As you said, he's hitting 455 with a 545 slugging percentage in 4 games this year. So far so good. And like you said, it's almost more the eye test, right? The numbers are
Yeah.
amazing, but it's more the eye test. He just looks comfortable. Every quote about him has been positive, and so nothing not to like there. My second stock up, I'm going with DJ Peters. This is a guy who last year, Cody Thomas, kind of the guy that a lot of people start talking about, hitting lots of home runs, that kind of thing. Peters is doing something similar, with the difference being Peters has sort of been on the fringe of that prospect conversation. Thomas is sort of out of nowhere, older guy, that kind of thing. Peters so far, 400 batting average, 571 on base, 1,000 slugging percentage. He's got 5 runs, 3 RBIs, a walk, and 2 homers so far. It's just nice to see. I mean, it's just a guy that looks like he has a massive swing. We know there's going to be some swing and miss, but right now he's making contact. He's making loud contact. And so I love to see that out of Peters. It's fascinating. I don't know where he fits in. He plays a lot of center field. He might be the second best center fielder. Maybe Chris Taylor could say that. I don't know about how Mckinstry looks out there, but he could be an interesting one to watch, especially with Bellinger's shoulder. We expect to see Bellinger pretty soon, but if they needed a permanent, so to speak, answer in center field, would Peters be the guy? But all of that aside, he's looked really good this spring, and that's been a positive thing for his development.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the biggest thing with Peters has been his plate discipline so far, because that's been the biggest knock on him coming up. Everyone knows he could hit home runs. Like, all you got to do is look at him to tell that he's 6'6", 230, 240 or whatever. And everyone knows he's a great defender as well. He's athletic out there, can play all 3 outfield positions. So the only thing with him is can he cut down on his strikeouts? And he almost, in the minor leagues, he rarely ever walks. And I feel like this spring he's been taking some good at-bats. He's been working counts. He's been walking. So that's good to see, because with him, the talent is there. Like, this is a guy, if you're to design a baseball player, like, this is probably the guy you're designing right here.
Totally.
So yeah, like you said, we don't exactly know where he stands right now. We'll get to the roster stuff. I don't have him making it as of now. We talked about this last week as well, but I think he's definitely in the mix, and he's probably an injury or 2 away from being called up. I'd say the one thing he does have going for him is, compared to years past, I feel like the Dodgers don't have as much outfield depth as they previously had. Like, I feel like the Dodgers outfield has just always been crowded for like the last 10 years. I'd say more of their depth this year is on the infield side. Like, if you look at their bench, they got Rios, Beatty, McKinstry, Taylor. Like, some of those guys can play outfield, but mostly they're all infielders. So I think that's something he has going for him. But yeah, I've liked what I've seen out of him. He hit an absolute bomb. Yesterday, I think it was. So yeah, he's off to a good spring, but that's nothing new for him. I feel like every year he has a good spring for the Dodgers. So it'll just be if he could kind of keep it up and keep the strikeout numbers down.
Well, and you said we're going to talk 40-man or 25-man roster, 26-man roster, excuse me, at the end of this. And I think he's in the mix. I mean, I really do. I think there's one guy he's sort of in competition with. We'll get to that. But I definitely think this is his best chance to make the opening day roster by far, given the loss of Jock Peterson, Kike Hernandez, and that kind of thing. So number 3 for you, you've got one stock down. Who's your stock down?
I do. My one stock down, and I hate doing this, but it's Joe Kelly. We haven't seen him pitch. We haven't really seen him get on a mound. I don't know. Do we even know like what injury he's dealing with? I feel like they kind of keep that stuff under wraps, at least now when they don't have to disclose anything. But from everything Dave Roberts has said, it's not looking like Joe's going to be on the opening day roster. He's probably going to have to start the year on the injured list. And just overall, like, we're not exactly sure where he fits into this team. I'd say if you look at the Dodgers bullpen, he's probably, fifth or sixth or even seventh down on the list as far as leverage goes. So I'm not exactly sure what role he's going to serve this year. That contract is probably a little tough to move. Maybe if the Dodgers are willing to eat some money, they could,
Yeah.
trade him. I doubt they DFA him this early. Maybe in the middle of the season if he's struggling. But I'm just not exactly sure where he fits in right now, and that's why I have him stocked down.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like you said, this is mostly a health thing. Obviously, we haven't seen
Yeah.
anything on the field to say one thing or the other, but the problem for him is his track record on the field hasn't been great either. And when we're talking about guys like Dennis Santana and the like, you start to ask questions about that. So I think that's totally fair. The guy that was going to be my stock down, this was probably midway through the week as I was prepping, was Sheldon Noisy. It felt like, hey, this is an opportunity for him to earn a spot, to prove himself. And he just was struggling. Now, that said, he's got a hit in 5 straight games at this point. He's now 5 for 13. They're all singles, 4 strikeouts. So it's not great, but he's not a stock down for me. I've got a couple honorable mentions we'll get to, but I'll just give it to the guy that I've been impressed with. It's sort of weird to say stock up on this person because I think expectations are moderately high, but it's Kenley Jansen. He's been impressive to watch. He's filling up the strike zone. I made the joke that he hadn't thrown any balls, and then, of course, he immediately throws 2. He gets up a single, so I got to catch myself on Twitter here. But 2 innings, only 1 hit allowed, 2 strikeouts, and I just love that he is pounding the strike zone, throwing strikes constantly. Weak contact, that's the thing, right? Not every out is alike. David Price had a ball that Anderson hit that looked like it was pretty much smoked, but right at the third baseman today. When I watch Kenley Jansen pitch, it's always pop-ups. It's always little grounders. It's not to say it never gets through, but I've just been impressed with him so far. And so he's my third stock up. I'll throw out a couple honorable mentions. One guy I mentioned already, Andre Jackson, 12th round pick out of Utah, 2 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. He's been good. Victor Gonzalez, 3 perfect innings with 3 strikeouts so far, and Julio Urias as well, a nice 3-inning perfect start today as well. So those 3 guys are honorable mentions. Was there anybody else on your list? I mean, I just named 8 guys, but anybody else on your list that you'd want to give a shout out to?
I'm not gonna lie. I thought for sure you were gonna bring up James Outen in here. I don't know what you've been watching, but he's been all over the place. No, I'm just kidding.
He's got some good defense.
He has looked good. Who else has looked good? I don't know. Trevor Bauer.
I mean, you want to give your guy a shout out? Your guy is not stock up. The stock for you is already through the roof. But I mean,
everyone knows. Everyone knows Corey Seager's looking good. I don't need to remind everyone every week. But yeah, he had an absolute bomb today. That went really far. But yeah, Trevor Bauer was the guy who impressed me. He kind of started off his outing bad. It's kind of the second time it's happened. He loaded the bases or was second and third or something, but he got out of the jam. And he ended up going 3 shutout innings, and his stuff is just absolutely nasty. He had his curveball working. It was unhittable.
Yeah.
Adding him to this rotation is insane. But yeah, I mean, I feel like pretty much all the regular type guys have all looked pretty good. I mean, you don't expect too much from them this early in the spring. It's not really about results for most of those guys. But I feel like everyone who's going to be the main contributors has looked pretty good. And Corey Seager has just looked the best of them all, to no surprise.
Can you name, Daniel, the Dodger who leads the team in hits in spring training?
Leads the team in hits?
Leads the team in hits. We've got a guy in the chat. Oscar.
I'd go DJ Peters, but I'm not sure.
DJ Peters is 4. He's tied for 5th. We got 3 guys with 5 hits and 1 guy with 6 hits.
Okay, well, Lux is one of the guys with 5 hits.
Lux has got 5. I mentioned Noisy. He's got 1 hit in 5 straight games.
Noisy's got 5.
Your boy Seager's got 5. So who's got 6?
Who's got 6?
McKinstry and Betts both have 4.
Who's got 6? I have no idea.
You gave this guy a negative shout out a week ago.
Oh, Matt Beatty.
Matt Beatty.
I actually considered him for my stock up this week. So
I mean, he was stock down last week. He's 6 for 12
I know.
at this point.
He's had a good week this week. So I considered him for stock up, and we'll get into him in our roster predictions. We'll see. I don't know where you have him, but I'll save where I have him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a guy who's 6 hits. He's been looking good.
I got to give 3 more shout outs.
Right field as well.
Yeah, holding down right field. 3 more shout outs. This has nothing to do with on the field, but I got a chance last week and then earlier today to sit down with 3 guys that are in Dodger spring training camp. Alex Vesia, Josiah Grade last week. I got an interview with Michael Grove today. That interview will post probably tomorrow. And I just am impressed. I mean, all three guys, super bright, super well spoken, super personable, just seem like the type of guys that you would want to hang out with. I mean, Vesia especially, it was like he just seemed like a guy that I had known, never met this guy
Yeah.
before. So all three of those guys, shout out to them for giving me a little bit of their time, sharing their story a little bit. But all three guys that I just came across like, man, the more I know about these guys, the more I get to see them. I want I want to root for them, more. And
Yeah.
Josiah Gray, we know where he's at. Alex Vesia, we'll get into him. Does he have a chance at making the opening day roster? Michael Grove is a guy that not a lot of people are talking about. He's only made one appearance. He was a second-round pick of the Dodgers in 2018, had Tommy John surgery, missed the whole year. 2019 got lit up in high A. 2020 alternate site. 2021 one inning of spring training. So we have almost nothing. But when you hear him tell the story, he joked that when he was on the mound in 2019 in high A, he's like, all I had was my fastball, and it was 92. So he's like, I had nothing. I was coming back from rehab. I didn't have the slider, blah, blah, blah. So he's got the slider back. He's added a changeup. The fastball is dialed up to where he wants it. So Michael Grove, I'm just saying, I mean, this isn't breaking news, but he's a guy who's like 17, 18 on most people's Dodger top prospects list. I think Michael Grove's the guy that a year or 2 years from now is going to be a top 100 prospect in baseball. Impressive one inning. I really liked the guy, and just hearing him talk, it makes a lot of sense. So that was a long-winded way of saying shout out to those three guys.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we haven't seen much of Michael Grove, but that one inning he pitched was pretty impressive. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more from him. That interview, I'm sure, is a good one. I watched the Josiah Gray and the Alex Vesia ones. For whoever hasn't seen those yet, definitely go check them out. They're really good. Those guys, they're great. They're great guys. A lot of personality. I feel like with minor league guys, you don't really get to know them as much. But these are guys who they're the future of the Dodgers. These are guys we're going to be seeing on the mound for a long time. And like you said, yeah, Vesia, that guy's got a lot of personality. I really enjoyed that interview.
Well, and Vesia and Gray, I mean, they're both D2 guys. Like, that's crazy to me when you think about, like, D2 guys don't make the NFL. I mean, like, there's maybe a few of them every year that get drafted. D2 guys don't make the NBA. And yet here you have two guys who are D2, Cal State Bakersfield and Lemoyne or something, some school in New York I've literally never heard of, where Josiah Gray went. Both of these guys end up making it. Josiah Gray hasn't technically made it to the big leagues. Vesia has, but just to hear their stories, Vesia told stories. He played summer ball in Alaska. Like, think about how far away that is from Cape Cod, like geographically, but also from a reputation wise. Josiah Gray obviously has not been a pitcher. I asked him, I was like, what happened? Like, why? Like, what did we miss all along the way where you didn't start pitching full time until college? So definitely really enjoyed those guys and spending some time with them. So as Daniel said, if you haven't heard those, please go check them out because it's good stuff. So let's move along. Big deal, no deal. So this is a segment where we read some quotes from people and you tell me big deal, no deal. We've got a couple of the headliners here right off the top. So I'll throw this one to you. I've got some thoughts, some well thought out thoughts here, but I'll start with you. This is Dave Roberts when asked if the Padres were a rival of the Dodgers, whether this was a rivalry between the Dodgers and Padres. He said, I just think that's a ways down the road. When you're talking about those types of rivalries, that's more generational and withstood the test of time. Right now, I think there's more to a rivalry than just geography. So I'll phrase it to you this way. I mean, usually we do big deal, no deal. I'll ask, are the Padres a rival of the Dodgers right now?
I think they are. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel like just looking at baseball right now, who are people going to be looking forward to watching this season? And it's going to be that when the Dodgers play the Padres, that's like the it series this season. You know, even Justin Turner said it, like when we play them, it's going to feel like 19 World Series games. I feel like there's like different meanings of the word rivalry. Like, no, it's not like a long-term rival. Like, that's the Giants for the Dodgers. Everyone knows that. But I mean, the Giants aren't really competing right now, so there's got to be someone competing with the Dodgers, and it's the Padres. Like, even if they weren't in the same division, like, I feel like that's like, the second or third best team in baseball right there. That's who eventually we're probably going to see them play each other in the postseason. And even last year when they did play, we saw tempers flare a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty clear that maybe these two teams don't like each other all that much. So I think it's a rivalry. I understand where Dave Roberts is coming from. Like, um, even though the Padres are coming for the Dodgers, they haven't got here yet. Like they didn't beat the Dodgers in a single series last year. They got swept in the postseason. So let's see them, beat the Dodgers a few more times before we really go all in and say, yes, this is the best rivalry in baseball.
Yeah.
Like I'm not there yet, but I will say I'm looking forward to those games this year.
Yeah, Robert on YouTube says the Padres have to prove they can beat the Dodgers. They haven't done anything yet. I agree with all those sentiments, but I was honestly shocked that Roberts would say something, not because like he was politically incorrect. It seems so, of course this is a rivalry. Of course. This is the best team in baseball and the second best team in baseball playing in the same division, separated by like 3 hours. The Padres, you have to understand, have always felt like the little brother to Los Angeles, to the Dodgers. The Padres have been obsolete. And there's no obvious other team that are the rival, right? Like, okay, the Giants. But like, does anybody get fired up to see the Dodgers play the Giants in 2019, 20, 21? Of course not. The Giants are terrible, and they're going to be terrible for another couple of years. Yes, the prospects are getting better, but like, obviously I would love to beat the Giants, but look at the intensity. Like, look at Tatis hitting the home run, robbed by Bellinger, Gratterall throwing his glove, Machado screaming F you at him. Like, the whole thing. This has everything you want in a rivalry. It is the two best teams in baseball. They're going to play a ton this season. You've got three MVP candidates on both teams. You've got Cy Young Award candidates on both teams. You've got personalities in Bauer and Machado. Like, it has everything. Machado with the Dodgers, history and sort of some back and forth there. Like, it has absolutely everything. So the idea that because like the Padres have only been good for a year, that this isn't a rivalry, of course it is. And the playoffs last year only intensified that. So to me, this was an obvious one that, yes, this is a rivalry. And maybe, I don't know if Roberts is poking the bear there, or maybe he's just trying to be politically correct and not offend anybody. I don't know, but it just seems so obvious to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel like we're kind of on the same page here. Either way, call it a rivalry, don't call it a rivalry. I'm just excited to see those games this year. That's all.
Yeah, and we'll get to a Trevor Bauer quote when it comes to the Padres here in a moment. But let's get to the second quote as we do. Big deal or no deal? And this was David Price, and this was today when he was asked, or he said that when news of Dodger interest in Trevor Bauer was breaking, he reached out to Andrew Friedman and told him, quote, "If it happens, I'm willing to do whatever you guys need me to do as far as role on the pitching staff." Big deal or no deal to you that David Price says, hey, if you guys are going to go sign Bauer, I'll do whatever you need me to do as far as my role goes?
This is a big deal to me because you don't see stuff like this every day. Like a veteran, 35 years old, former Cy Young winner, just going up and saying, "Hey, I'll come out of the bullpen, I'll start, I'll do whatever it takes." Like, you don't see that very often. And I just want to say, like, David Price is just a great guy.
Yeah.
Forget about everything he's accomplished on the field, which is great as well, but just off the field, he's just a great guy. Like, not only did he say stuff like this, but he paid Dodgers minor league salaries last year. Yeah, when he hadn't even played a single game in the organization, and that was also while he was in the midst of opting out and giving up his full salary for the 2020 season. So he's just a really good dude. I'm happy to have him in Dodger blue. But back on the field, I think this is a big deal because we've seen, how much starting pitching depth the Dodgers have, and we know there's not going to be a spot for everyone. And we've always just kind of assumed like David Price is getting a spot in that rotation because he's been a starter his whole career. That's all he's really ever done. And I still think he's going to start out the year in the rotation and probably be there for a majority, if not the whole year. But then once you start looking to the postseason, like you really only need 4 starters. And we know if healthy, 3 of those spots are Kershaw, Bauer, and Buehler. So that only leaves 1 spot left. And then the rest of those guys are probably all, most of them at least, going to be in the bullpen. And if Price says he's willing to be one of those guys, I feel like his stuff could play up really well out of the bullpen. We saw it a little bit in the 2018 postseason when the Red Sox won it all. He came out of the bullpen a couple times and looked really good. So, the Dodgers are kind of short on lefties out of the bullpen, or at least established lefties that you could rely on. They have some lottery tickets or guys with high upside that who knows could end up being something. We'll see. But the thought of having David Price, in the back end of a bullpen for an October run, that's pretty enticing.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm with you. This is a big deal because you don't see it of a guy like Price's caliber. And to your point, if David Price wants to be a starting pitcher, he's going to be one of the 5 starting pitchers for the Dodgers in the regular season. Like, that is without question. This isn't him sort of protecting himself against possibly missing out on the spot. He has a spot in the rotation if he wants it. Now, he could lose it, but he's not going to lose it before opening day. I can assure you of that. But I guess the question to me is, would you rather have David Price as a relief pitcher than a starter?
For me, in the postseason, the answer is yes. In the regular season, like, frankly, I just don't care that much. Like, the Dodgers are going to win 100 games regardless of what role David Price plays. But I'd say in the postseason, I feel like you could have more value as a reliever that could pitch in 3 or 4 games in a series than as a fourth starter who only gets 1 game. And maybe he is the fourth starter and he's still pitching out of the bullpen. In, let's say he pitches out of the bullpen in game 1, starts game 4, and then he's out of the bullpen a game in game 7 or something like that. I think that's really interesting. I think he could really thrive in that role. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that plays out, but I'm very interested in seeing Price out of the bullpen.
And you mentioned it. I mean, he has 9 relief appearances in the postseason. Obviously, he came up in 2008, 5 relief appearances, 1.59 ERA, and then 2017, the other big one, where both of his appearances that year were out of the bullpen. So we know he can do it, and you saw him in 1 inning today. I mean, this stuff is going to play up in the bullpen. He knows how to pitch, and so it just had me wondering, would I rather a guy like Gonsolin or May, who maybe would struggle more to adapt to life in the bullpen, would I rather them develop as a starter? To your point, the regular season, how much does it matter? I mean, I think this year matters more than most because I think the Padres are going to push the Dodgers more than the Dodgers have been pushed in recent years. But it just got me wondering, would I rather have Price in the bullpen sort of consistently to get May and Gonsolin consistent starts, or at least one of those guys consistent starts? I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. You and I have said we both like David Price. We're higher on David Price than probably the average Dodger fan. I love the attitude behind this, and it did get me thinking. I mean, I think he's an absolute weapon. I mean, if you want to talk about like a potential closer, like David Price could be your closer. You know? So maybe it's a situation where Jansen gets the closing gig, and if it doesn't work out, maybe you go to a guy like David Price. Maybe he's the second guy in line for that, where you're at least maximizing the potential and the talent. The Dodgers don't care what he's getting paid, right? The dollar numbers are being spent no matter what. All they care about at this point is winning and developing. And so definitely a fascinating storyline to keep in mind there.
And I think also one thing to consider and could play a factor in this is David Price didn't pitch all of last season. And the year before that, he dealt with some injuries. So he's not a guy that you're just going to say, hey, you could start every 5th day, make 30 starts this season, throw 200 innings. Like, no, that's not going to be David Price this year. They're going to manage his innings. And I feel like maybe a way to do that is to pitch him in the bullpen, at different points of the season. I don't know exactly how that works out. Maybe he starts the year in the rotation, and then maybe in the middle of the season, you give him a little break and let him go be a reliever for a month or 2. And then you could kind of decide from there, do we want to move him back to the rotation? Is he great in the bullpen and we want to leave him there? So there's a lot of different options here, which is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got a couple more. We got 3 or 4 more quotes. We'll go to Trevor Bauer for the next 2. He's going to be a regular in this segment, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
This is the first quote. I figure if they can't score off me with 1 eye open, it's going to be difficult to score off me with 2 eyes open. Just having a little bit of fun. He went on to indicate essentially that this was something he's planning on doing in the regular season. Big deal or no deal that Trevor Bauer intends to pitch with 1 eye closed in the regular season?
To me, it's not a big deal. It's funny. It's interesting. It's a way for him to get himself in the news, which I feel like he just loves. He loves the attention. But to me, it's not a huge deal. It's pretty funny when he was pitching. I was watching the game with my roommate, and we're both UCLA fans. We follow UCLA baseball, so we've been following Bauer since like way back when. So when we saw him pitching with 1 eye open, we were like kind of talking back and forth, and we are like, what's the reason he's going to give for this? And we both agreed he's going to be like, oh, I get people out with 2 eyes open, all the time. I just wanted to challenge myself. And then go figure, after the game, he goes and says basically that same exact thing. So I thought that was funny. He pitched pretty well with
Yeah.
whenever he had his one eye closed. So maybe that helps him focus. I don't know. I'm sure he's got some sort of science behind it, knowing him. But to me, this isn't a huge deal at
Yeah,
all.
first he played it. He's like, "Oh, I can't tell you. It's a secret." Like he legitimately, like when you read the
Yeah.
transcript, obviously I wasn't watching the interview, so I don't know with what sort of his face looked like when he said that. But at first he was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to say anything more about that." And then later on he said, "Oh, it got me going," and blah blah blah. And so, man, what a fascinating dude. What a fascinating dude.
Yeah.
A couple people, Eddie Garcia, he goes, if he loses, be prepared for the LA crowd to boo him out of the game. I mean, it's true. It's all fun and games until you do that in a game and something backfires on you. But we'll see. Second Trevor Bauer quote for you. Manny Machado quote here. I'm just mad Manny didn't make the trip. He's already ducking me. I wanted to face Manny. I wanted to see him. I'm mad he's ducking me. Machado, not a popular figure in Dodgerland. I would imagine that the quickest way, I've seen it in real life. The quickest way for Trevor Bauer to acclimate himself to the Dodger faithful is to pick on Manny Machado. I think he picked the right tact here.
Yeah, now this is another just fun quote. He's joking around, but yeah, no, I feel like he knows he's kind of adding more fuel to the rivalry, like we just talked about by doing this. But this is something he's been joking about for a while. If you look up the
It's
numbers, I
not
don't
pretty.
have them in front of me, but yeah, Manny Machado has worn out Trevor Bauer, so that's kind of why he's making the joke, and hopefully he could turn that around. He even joked, him and Friedman were joking about it at his press conference. Friedman said they could give him some help with that. So yeah, but yeah, that's another fun quote. Manny's I'm sure he'll say something back at some point. He's never one to not speak his mind either. So yeah, that'll be something to keep an eye on. Who knows? We're probably going to see that matchup a lot this
Yeah, I
season.
think Manny's hitting like 700 off of Bauer with 4 home runs in like
Yeah.
12 at bats or something. Like it's an absolutely absurd matchup. Bauer says he's just been setting him up, that he's just been playing with him all along. So there you go.
Hey.
2 more quotes here. The first one, a former Dodger, Jock Peterson, saying he's not a fan of analytics-driven defensive alignments with the Dodgers. Big deal or no deal to you that Jock Peterson speaking out against his distaste for shifts?
Look, I love Jock, and I don't know, this quote's probably no deal, but I thought it was hilarious because we all know and love Jock, but we also know he's not like the smartest person out there, and I mean that like very nicely. He's very good at baseball, but it doesn't surprise me at all to hear him say he's not, a fan of the analytics. He's more of a guy who just wants to go out there and play, and I feel like there's a lot of players like that, and that's like totally fine. Like everyone has their own way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, I'm cool with the way the Dodgers handle, their
Yeah.
defensive positioning. The numbers show that they're the best team in baseball at that. So yeah, good luck to Jock in
Yeah.
Chicago. I love you,
Yeah.
man.
My reaction was nobody needed the shift more than Jock Peterson did.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
I'll just leave it at that. I mean, good for him. You get to experience it. I think I retweeted it with, hey, let's check back in on this quote in about 6 months and see how much he likes shifting or not shifting. So we'll leave it there. Last quote, not really a reaction one, but just an interesting quote. Chris Taylor on his sort of feelings about playing all over the place. Quote, I really don't have a preference. The most important thing to me is playing. If I'm on the field, I'm happy. Whether I'm playing second base every day or shortstop every day or outfield or I'm playing all over, I really just want to be on the field as much as I can be. I know on this team playing every single day is not realistic with all the guys we have, but whatever is going to get me on the field as much as possible, that's what I want.
Yeah, I feel like if you would have just read me this quote and not said who it was, like I would have said Chris Taylor right off the bat. I feel like this embodies him
Yeah.
perfectly. Like he doesn't care where he plays. He just wants to be on the field. He could play all over. One thing we've seen this spring, he's been playing more third base than he
Yep.
had in the past. He's never really had to play third base because the Dodgers have had other options, but now he's got, shortstop, second base, left field, center field. Now he's adding third base to the mix. We'll see him all over this season. I feel like he's basically going to be playing every day.
Yeah.
Like, no, he won't have an everyday position, but he's going to be filling in for guys just about every day. So yeah, he's going to play a big role on this team. It's also a contract year for Chris Taylor, so that's a little, added incentive for him. I think he's going to have a big year. He looks really good so
Yeah,
far.
I mean, if he's the backup second baseman, shortstop, center fielder, and left field, I mean that's
Yeah.
that's 4. He could give each of those guys 1 day off, and he's already playing 4 times a
Yep.
week. I think AJ Pollock probably maybe gets 2 days off, so there's 5. I mean, you're already
Yep.
up to 5 games a week. Gavin Lux, if he's your second baseman, so I think Chris Taylor's going to play, just about as many games as anybody other than Seager, Bellinger, and Mookie. Aside from those three,
Yeah.
maybe Muncy. I mean, he's probably fifth on the team in games played, would be my guess this year. So he will get plenty of opportunities. And yeah, I think it's a big deal because, as you said, it's a contract year for him. But I think it just speaks to a guy like Jock Peterson. There was always a sense he couldn't wait to get out of LA. And it wasn't because he didn't like the people. It was just his personality. And that quote that we just talked about fits it. His personality, his approach to baseball just wasn't the same as the Dodgers. Yes, he fit in. Yes, he succeeded. But they wanted him to be a platoon guy. He didn't want to be a platoon guy. They want him to shift. He didn't like shifting. Taylor, on the other hand, just gets it. Most guys in his situation, Kike Hernandez is the perfect example. I think he would have loved to come back, but he also he wants to be an everyday guy at second base or wherever. He's going to get that chance. With Chris Taylor, he's like, I don't need to be an everyday guy at one position. I'm fine playing all over the place. I think it speaks to exactly where he fits in with the Dodgers. And I hope you know, I don't mean any of this as a knock against Jock or anyone else, because I can't blame Jock Peterson for approaching things the way he did. That's probably more how I would have approached it if I were in his situation, honestly. I'm just saying it's fascinating to me that this is a guy that's drinking the Dodger Kool-Aid, essentially. Andrew Friedman is in his head, and I think that's good news for the Dodgers, not only this year, but as a guy that could potentially be a Dodger beyond the life of this current contract.
Yeah. Chris Taylor is an absolute manager's dream. He's probably the lowest maintenance guy in that clubhouse. So yeah, just an absolute joy to coach. He'll do whatever you need and won't say a single word about it. He'll play any position. He'll go up there and bunt. He'll go steal a base. He'll hit and run. He does it all. He's a baseball player.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the perfect way to describe him.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. Well, let's shift gears for one last segment before we get into the mailbag. And that's me and you making our first round of predictions for the 26-man roster. It used to be 25. Last year it was 30, then 28, and then it stayed at 28. I believe it got down to 26 for the postseason maybe. But this is the first time we've had a 26-man opening day roster. So here we are. I'll just, for some background here, for context, 2019, there was no designated hitter, 25-man roster. The Dodgers took 13 pitchers and 12 position players. 2020, they took 16 pitchers and 14 position players. When it dropped to 28, they dropped one of each. So 15 and 13 was kind of where they landed last year. So I'll split this up into a few categories, and then we can talk at the end. We've got obvious, mostly obvious, and dicey are the three categories. So the obvious category, I can't imagine there's going to be any discussion. Will Smith and Austin Barnes behind the plate. Max Muncy at first. Chris Taylor at second. Corey Seager at short. Justin Turner and Edwin Rios at third. Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, A.J. Pollock in the outfield. Kershaw, Bauer, Buehler, Urias, and Price as starters. Again, Price was on the sort of obvious before today. He pitches. That moves him there. And then in the bullpen, Jansen, Knebel, Gratterall, Gonzalez, and Trinan. Maybe Gratterall doesn't belong there, although it seems like they're pretty confident he'll be fine. So with that crew, we've got 10 pitchers and 10 hitters. As far as guys on, I imagine you have no issue with any of those 20 players being written in pen on the opening day roster.
Yeah. I wrote down my locks, and I had those exact names. I will say I added Gavin Lux to that mix because I feel like he's trending in that direction, but I have no problem leaving him off and putting him kind of in the next tier. But yeah, that list was if all those guys are healthy, they're on the opening day roster.
And Gavin Lux is alone in the mostly obvious category. I think for me, it's like, how can you argue? I mean, he was going to be the starting second baseman a year ago. Every quote, every performance, everything seems to indicate that's where we're headed. So basically, when we get through the first two categories, I'm up to 21. We've got 10 pitchers and 11 hitters with 5 spots left. That leaves us into the dicey category. Now, I'll go sort of person by person here. And the first guy, sort of, I guess if it were the next most confident, I'll go from most confident to least confident with my last 5 spots, and you can react to each. The next guy for me is Zach Mckinstry. He's versatile. He can hit. I think he gives you McKinstry, Taylor, Rios, and as non-starters, assuming Lux gets the second base job. So for me, McKinstry, yes, he's not a sure thing, but again, Kike Hernandez is gone. He's done everything right. He's played everywhere. Everybody's been hyping him up. He feels to me like the 22nd guy that gets his name written on pen. Zach McKinstry in your final 26, yes or no?
Yes, he is, and I agree with everything you just said. I mean, we know how much the Dodgers love versatility, and he's him and Chris Taylor are the two guys that are most versatile. McKinstry's looked good this spring. He's gotten his hits. He looks good at the plate. He looks great defensively. So yeah, I think something crazy would have to happen for him not to make the opening day roster.
Okay, well then I'm going to shift to the bullpen because I think the last four spots are where I think you could go just about any direction. And there's a couple names that I know people are going to be surprised haven't made it yet, but we're getting to them, okay? So the bullpen's where it's tough. I've got 4 spots left on the roster. Now, I would say it's a minimum of 3 bullpen arms, maybe 4. But for the 4 bullpen spots, 3 bullpen spots, I've got Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Alex Vesia, Clevenger, Kelly, Pepio, Alexander, Santana, Nelson. Those are guys that I think deserve to be considered. Before we narrow that down, are there any names that I missed on that list? May, Gonsolin, Vesia, Clevenger, Kelly, Pepio, Alexander, Santana, and Jimmy Nelson.
Yep. Those are the guys I had wrote down too. You added a couple, but yeah, you didn't miss anyone.
Brandon Morrow would be a guy that maybe people would think, but he has, as it's been mentioned, not anywhere near ready, won't be close to ready for opening day, so you can cross him off.
Yeah.
Joe Kelly, you've mentioned, you could probably cross him off my list because it doesn't sound like they're expecting him to be ready there as well. So far on my list, I've only got Victor Gonzalez as a lefty in the bullpen, so I think we need at least one more left-handed pitcher out of the bullpen. From my perspective, that gives you Vesia, Clevenger, or Alexander. I think Alexander's third on that list. I give Vesia the second left-handed spot. I think it's probably 50-50 with Clevenger. Clevenger's a duck. Vesia came on the show. I'm very torn between these two guys. But this is the spot that I could go either way. I think spring training's a big deal for. I've got Vesia over Clevenger for my next spot. And just to round out the bullpen, I do think Gonsolin and May both make the bullpen. So I've got both of them in the bullpen. I see them spending, I could see them spending time in the minors, but with the minor league season a little bit up in the air, I think they're weapons in the bullpen. So leading up to my one last spot on the roster, which we'll get to, I've got Vesia, Gonsolin, and May. So what do you got for those next 3 spots in the bullpen?
Yeah, so I agree on May and Gonsolin. I think they'll both make the roster. I think something we could see is we know they're going to be built up as starters, so they'll be able to go multiple innings. I think we could see stuff like, tandem type starts where the starter throws 4 or 5 innings and then either May or Gonsolin comes out of the bullpen, throws 3 innings, and that helps save the rest of the bullpen as well. So yeah, I have both of those guys. And my third guy, I was with you. We needed a lefty here. I just had a different lefty than you, and I'm not gonna lie, I had the guy you had last. I have Scott Alexander making the roster. He's the guy who the organization is most familiar with. And I just feel like the other guys are kind of more projects, and I'm talking about Clevenger and Vesia. They also have options available. I think Alexander has an option available too, so that's not a huge role in it. But I just think, you kind of know what you're going to get out of Alexander. I think they want to send Vesia and Clevenger to AAA for a little bit, let them work on some things, and then we'll see them eventually. But I think Alexander, just because he's got the experience, he's been around for a while, I think he'll get the first crack at the opening day roster. But I don't think the leash will be all that big. Like if he comes out in April and has 2 or 3 bad outings, then I think we could see, Vesia or Clevenger come take his spot.
Yeah, Alexander is such a fascinating guy for me. 2 appearances, hasn't looked great. The spring means a lot less for him than it does for these other guys because, as you said, the Dodgers know what he has. Last year he was good, 12 innings, an ERA under 3. Not as many appearances as maybe you'd thought. He only pitched 17 innings in 2019. So he had 69 and 66 innings in 2017 and 18. And ever since then, it just feels like he's a little bit on the outside. Vesia and more so Clevenger just felt like guys the Dodgers intentionally went to snipe. I mean, Vesia was kind of unloading Floro and trading up, so I can feel that one. Clevenger, it was like they basically involved themselves in a trade that they had no business being in just to go get this guy. So that's kind of where I went there, but I think we're all in the same spot. Vesia, Clevenger, you could convince me of Alexander. Again, I think if Vesia or Clevenger would have to, Alexander is probably like his name's in pencil, and Vesia or Clevenger would have to do something to go take that spot.
Yeah, and let me just be clear here. This is just like the opening day roster. I'd say if we were sitting here projecting who's going to make the postseason roster, I know that's a long ways away, but then I don't see Alexander being a postseason guy unless he goes out and has a great year, of course. But then I would have went with Vesia or Clevenger. It's kind of a toss-up. Both those guys have a lot of upside. They got great stuff. But I think Alexander will get the first crack at it. But as soon as he falters, like I said, then they won't hesitate to replace him.
Yeah, and it is interesting because somebody in there asks, well, when Joe Kelly is ready, where do you go? Now, we'll save that conversation for a moment because I suppose it this is decided by what you do with that last spot. So the question I think there is, do you go hitter or pitcher with your last spot? Because
Yeah.
as it stands right now, they're basically 50-50, and you could sort of justify it either way. I think if you go hitter, there's two guys that I would think, Matt Beatty and DJ Peters, I think are the two. Beatty's been playing right
Yep.
field a bit. They don't necessarily have a great option behind Mookie Betts in right field. Dave mentioned the lack of depth in the outfield. Plus, Matt Beatty is hit. I can't imagine they send him down. You mentioned that last time. If they go
Yeah.
pitcher, I think that's where it gets interesting. I don't know if the lefties that we just mentioned, if one of those guys makes it. I'd love to see a guy like Pepio, who Josiah Gray said was the best pitcher at the alternate site last year,
Yep.
who flashed everything plus change up the whole deal. I'm not saying he's going to be like the guy from the Brewers was last year. I'm blanking on his name right now with the nasty changeup, Devin Williams. But I mean, like, he definitely looks like he could be a major asset. And then I think a guy like Dennis Santana, if you go pitcher, could be an option there. Not that you need the length with May and Gonsolin, but I think he's done a lot this spring. But Joe Kelly again would be the other guy. Ultimately, I'm actually going to go with Matt Beatty as my last guy, just because I think it gives them the least amount of headaches. It does right by him. A weekend, maybe they have to move some guys around, but I don't love it. But I'll start with Beatty. I think he just has played well enough this spring. His longevity, depth, etc. I don't know. I'm very torn on this one. If there's two spots that are going to change, it's my left-handed pitcher and it's Matt Beatty. But that's who I've got. Did you go with Beatty or did you go somewhere else?
I went with
Oh
Matt
man,
Beatty
we
as
need more
well.
debate on this show.
I know. Well, let me explain my thought process here. You kind of laid it out well, of what this spot is coming down to. For me, I went with a position player just because I feel like with May and Gonsolin and those guys on the roster, they could give you
Yeah.
multiple innings. So you could afford to be with one less reliever, at least to start the year when everyone's fresh. Maybe after a span of when you play 15 straight games and arms are getting taxed a little bit, then you want the extra arm in there. But I think to start the year, you could go with the extra position player. And I went with Beatty because he's been hitting well in spring training. I feel like he's earned it to this
Yeah.
point. And B, he's like you just said, they don't have a ton of outfield depth. He's been playing right field. If you look at the roster, there really is no backup right fielder to Mookie Betts. And I know Mookie's going to play basically every day, so that's not a huge concern or anything. But I just think if you have Beatty in there that covers every spot, I went with him over DJ Peters. And another guy I considered whose name we haven't even mentioned at all was Matt Davidson. We heard Dave Roberts say he's in the
The
mix
bullpen.
at the beginning of spring. And it's because of his two-way ability. He could play the infield, he could hit homers, and then he could come in and relieve if you have to. Ultimately, I left him off. They would have to add him to the 40-man roster. I don't know if they're in a huge rush to do that. I hope they could keep him around, and maybe he starts the year at AAA. And I feel like we haven't really seen him pitch much, so maybe he could go pitch a little bit at AAA. He even said himself like he could use a little more
Yeah.
experience pitching. He's not a pitcher. He's an infielder who's
Who
starting to
throws
pitch.
93?
Yeah, he throws 93. He said he could probably get it harder if he throws more consistently. So I left him off, and I think DJ Peters, he's a guy who will be up at some point, but I didn't have him on the opening day roster. But yeah, so that's why I went with Beatty. And then on the pitching side, the guys I considered are pretty much the guys you named. It was between for me, if I was gonna leave off Beatty and go with another pitcher, I was debating between Dennis Santana and Jimmy
Yeah.
Nelson. Jimmy Nelson is another guy who they're planning to build up as a starter, so that would give you even more guys who could just throw multiple innings at a time, which is always good. But I think I don't know. We'll see. I need to see more out of Jimmy Nelson. We've only seen him one outing. He looked good, but that's like the first time
Yeah.
he's pitched in like years. So I need to see a little more out of him. And Dennis Santana, he's looked great. We talked about him already. He for me, he would be the first guy called up whenever there's an injury in the bullpen or if a guy's not doing well and they want to option him. He's the first guy out, I'd say. But that means, he could be up within a
Yeah.
week. Like just because you don't make the opening day roster doesn't mean we're not going to see you pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think of, so the names not making it in our case are either Vesia or Clevenger or Alexander, Joe Kelly, Ryan Pepio, Dennis Santana, Jimmy Nelson, DJ Peters,
Yeah.
Matt Davidson. Um, I mean, absolutely loaded. And we're not even getting to like the Josiah Grays of the world,
Yeah.
you know, Andre Jack, like those guys, they're not even getting mentioned in this conversation because of this. So
Yeah.
Pepio of all those guys is another one who's not on the 40-man roster. Is Jimmy Nelson? I don't believe is on the 40-man.
He's
Not on the
not. No,
40-man
he's
roster. Davidson not on the 40-man roster. So Nelson and Davidson for me would be perfect. They'd have to be okay with this, but they would be perfect candidates to say, hey, go to the alternate site, go to AAA. We've got a plan. Like, we're going to develop you. We're
yeah.
going to build you up. We're not going to rush this. Now, that takes a lot of trust from them in the Dodgers to believe that, hey, you're going to take care of me on the other end. But yeah, I mean, we joked you go hitter or reliever with that last spot. Well, maybe you just go Matt Davidson and you take both.
He's both.
And
Yeah.
so we'll see. But I mean, yeah, it's an absurd abundance of riches. Somebody's asking who's Pepio. Pepio's a reliever, not on the 40-man roster. He was a high pick the last few years
He's a
ago.
prospect. Yeah. He's been getting a lot of buzz over the last, month or so. Everyone's been, hyping him up. He's probably maybe the prospect who people don't know about, who will know about pretty soon. I mean, he pitched good in his first spring outing. We'll probably see him again sometime soon.
Yeah,
here.
I mean, watch his changeup. His changeup is absolutely insane. Like I said, I mean, I'm not trying to compare him to. Is it Devin Williams? Am I getting that name right? I feel self-conscious as I say it out loud. But I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be that good. But that's a guy with a changeup that's absolutely filthy. Pepio, Josiah Gray and Dave Roberts both used the phrase plus to describe that. So there you go.
Yeah.
We've got Austin Barnes and Will Smith, Max Muncy, Gavin Lux, Chris Taylor, Corey Seager, Justin Turner, Edwin Rios, Mookie Betts, Bellinger, Pollock, Beatty, McKinstry, Kershaw, Buehler, Bauer, Price, Urias, Jansen, Knebel, Graterol, Gonzalez, Trinan, May, Gonsolin, and Vesia for me. So I believe the only difference between our two is Alexander for Vesia. So there you go.
Yep, that's the only difference. We're on the same page here.
2 weeks from now when we meet on the 22nd, or maybe we'll do the 29th. We'll see. Opening day's the 1st. We'll do another round of this and see if anything changes.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think that left-handed spot is a big one. And as unfortunate it is as it is, you can just about assume that one of those 26 guys might be dealing with an injury that keeps them on the disabled list. We're the injured list, excuse me. So we're hoping against that, but it just feels like that's the type of thing that happens. Obviously, the Dodgers have some options. So we've got a couple minutes left. Let's get to some mailbag questions before we go. So if anybody's got a question, throw it in the chat. We appreciate all the folks joining us on YouTube, a couple folks on Periscope, Twitter, and Facebook as well. We appreciate all you guys for joining us as usual. But let's see. Any questions? Throw them in there. We've got the first one. Keith Evans says, if Dave Roberts screws things up, it better be a wrap. Nice man, but already cost us at least 2 rings. What do you think, Daniel? Any chance that Dave Roberts is on a short leash this year?
I could promise you, I don't have any insider information, but I could just promise you that Dave Roberts' job is as secure as ever right now. I can't think of anything that could happen this season that would result in him being fired. So I'm just not even going to think about it. I feel like it's better if we just don't even consider that as an option. Then you're just not disappointed in the end.
Exactly. Patricio Manes asks, how is Bellinger? That's a great question. We actually got an update. They're expecting him to play, I believe a week from today is the date, maybe
March 15th.
Yep. They said he fielded three innings defensively on the backfields earlier. So definitely positive news for Cody Bellinger. I don't know how else to say it. It's positive. He's headed in the right direction. It doesn't sound like they're worried about his availability for opening day. So that's good news on the Bellinger front. Adam asks, who goes down when Joe Kelly comes back? I kind of hinted at that. But we know it's not going to be the lefty, which is who you and I were debating about. Does Matt Beatty go down and they just take on an extra reliever? What do you do? Again, relief pitching that I've got is Jansen, Knebel, Graterol, Gonzalez, Trinan, May, Gonsolin, and Vesia. You've got Alexander. Who goes down in the event that Joe Kelly comes back?
Yeah, I think we have to see how things play out to answer that. Like, it depends on who's pitching well. It depends on who's healthy. Like, something we've seen from the Dodgers in the past is they kind of manipulate the injured list. Like, if they want to get a guy a rest for 10 or 15 days, they'll say he's got a sore shoulder or sore elbow or something or whatever, and they'll give him some time off. I think we'll see a lot of that this year. The Dodgers have so much depth that they could afford to do stuff like that. So who knows? Maybe when Joe Kelly's healthy, we'll see someone mysteriously have a sore back and they'll hit the injured list.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A couple more questions.
Or I mean, hey, real injuries happen
Yeah.
too. Like I'm not just gonna sit here and expect the full 26-man roster to stay healthy even for 1 week. Like guys get hurt all the
Yeah,
time.
a couple questions and we'll be done. The first one is from Laura, which asks, what is wrong with Gradwell? The answer is we don't have a ton of information. You could kind of read between the lines. Dave Roberts made a comment of he's dealing with something that a lot of people in the world are dealing with, something along those lines that prevented him from being able to train at the way he wanted to be training. So, again, look, if they don't want to say it overtly, I'm not going to be the guy that says it overtly. The short version is he didn't get to train the way that he had hoped to be trained, probably didn't come in the shape that they were hoping he would come in it. And so it's a slow build. There's a number of guys that are kind of in that boat. Hey, slow build up. We don't want to rush anything. Gratterall's on that list. But they did say, hey, for a reliever, it's not like a starter where he needs to get built up from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 innings. He's like, hey, if he can get 3 appearances in the spring, we'll feel good about that.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. With a reliever, they could afford to have a setback or two in the spring and still be ready for opening day. It's not like a starter where they have to get built up, and if you have one setback that screws up everything. So I think Gratterall will be fine, even if he doesn't. Even if he starts the year on the injured list or in AAA at the alternate site, wherever, like he's a guy who's going to make a big impact on this season. And that's what's really important, not if he's, on the mound April 1st.
Yeah, and he's a guy that needs development. I mean, as much as we've already seen him at the major league level, the priority with him is not like, hey, let's just get him to the big leagues as quickly as possible.
Right.
The bummer is that spring training is a time that he could probably use more than just about anybody else, just getting tips and pointers from some of these other guys. And so, definitely a good one there. So, well, hey, that'll do it for us tonight. We just went over the hour mark. We appreciate, as always, you guys joining us. As I said, check out those interviews with Josiah Gray as well as with Alex Vesia. We've got a Michael Grove one dropping, I believe, tomorrow. So check that out. Great guys you're going to want to learn about as well as root for. So we appreciate it. Check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. Andrew's asking about Dodger ticket prices, all the latest updates on tickets and how you can get them and whether there will be fans. DodgerBlue.com's got all the latest. Dodger Blue 1958 on all the social media. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you watching as always. Vin Scully's going to take us home.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.